This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
A globe-spanning conspiracy that revolves around a secret text and Gilgal Rephaim, the wheel of the giants on the Golan Heights. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Yes, this is a plot device in a forthcoming novel, but it is a novel that reveals some spiritual, supernatural truths in the context of the fulfillment of end times Bible prophecy. And given that you're dealing with a more action-packed story, but with the same kind of mysteries behind it as, say, a Dan Brown novel based on a Christian end times prophetic worldview, yeah, I'm all about this story. One of our guests you know very well. He's been on this program many times before, going back more than 10 years. He's got a master's from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, a PhD from Louisiana Baptist University, pastor of the Way Congregation in Denver, Dr. Doug Hamp, and joining us for the first time is co-author in the new book, Regenesis Code, The Cosmic Conspiracy, Book 1, a writer, director, and film editor whose credits include Faith Like Potatoes, Breakaway, and Journey to Grace, Morné Theunissen. Gentlemen, welcome. Doug, you're familiar to our audience who have been following us for any length of time. You've been on this program going back, the Future Congress in 2011, so, more than 10 years.
Oh, been a while.
Morné, you are new to our audience, so give us a little bit of your background. You seem to have a rather creative spirit.
Yeah, I think I know more about all of you than you do about me. I've been following a lot of your work over the years, and so my own background is actually more in the film industry. So I've been working for years, and specifically in the faith-based film industry. That's I had a background in missions, and then my heart is to reach the nations for the kingdom, with the gospel, and no better tool to do that than media, film and books, which is a more recent adventure. So I've worked on a number of productions, films. Some might be more familiar to your audience, like Faith Like Potatoes, and some less so. And I've been following all of your work for years. I first heard of Doug with Corrupting the Image, and that must have been about
2011, 2012, yeah, somewhere there.
Around there. So it's very exciting. I was also, a producer for Rob Skiba's Seed short film.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, so I basically helped to produce it here in South Africa. We brought, it was more cost effective to do it here, and I just basically facilitated the whole process here. So it's obviously very sad. That was something that was, he had a big vision for that, as you're all aware, and that obviously didn't happen. But Doug and I connected on this. I can't remember when it was. It was initially and I think we'll discuss that as as the conversation goes on. Initially as a film project, and we believe it might still is
a film project. That's the plan.
The vision where it's going.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's how I got involved.
Well, Doug, you are a pastor, as our viewers, listeners know, and you've written several nonfiction books. We've talked about those on the program here. Most recently, book 3 of the Corrupting the Image trilogy. What made you decide to try delving into fiction?
Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. Oh, man. I have a whole new respect for fiction writers because it is a lot of work.
Amen.
Making sure that everything fits together, and you can't footnote everything. You gotta show it, not tell it, and all that good stuff, right? But I began to realize that the power of story is absolutely immense, and Jesus knew about that, right? He told a lot of parables, and so people just love stories. I love stories. Who doesn't love a good story and a good movie? And so I just started. I kept thinking about the end times. That's what I've been talking about. And I thought, this is such an incredible story we have of the end times. I really want this to be as visual as possible, because I think if people can see it, then they're going to be like, oh, And, I've kind of geeked out sometimes when I've watched Avengers or, some of the Marvel stuff. And you kind of go onto YouTube and you find some of those other videos that are explaining all of the little Easter eggs that you didn't see, right? And they just love to show that. And I did that for The Matrix. And like, you probably didn't see this, but check this out, right? And there's a lot of people doing that. So I thought, there's so much in this story that we could put in sort of as little Easter eggs within stuff that's really in your face. And what is more epic than the return of Jesus? I mean, I can't think of anything that's more epic than that. And it's real, right? I mean, this is going to happen. And, we all might disagree on various little aspects of it, but we all agree on the big part of it, that he's coming back. And that coming back sequence, I just kept researching this, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is, monumental. And so then it was a matter of how do we create a story to showcase this, a story that anybody can love, anybody can really get excited about and say, wow, that was a great book or great movie. And then they also get all of the other biblical truths.
Yeah. Morné, now how does the impact of the written word compare to visual? And the reason I ask that is looking at the way the enemy has used some of the more popular books and films in recent years, like the Dan Brown novels that have been turned into movies starring Tom Hanks. And, if you remember the Da Vinci Code, Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland plays a key part. It's a key location in the unfolding of the plot. And suddenly, Rosslyn Chapel, which had been all but forgotten, suddenly starts seeing this huge surge of tourists who are thinking, hey, maybe they're really onto something. Friends of mine who are really, really intelligent, do you think there's something to that? No, there's nothing to this. But people read the book, see the movie, and suddenly, for some reason, they were willing to buy those concepts that kind of didn't go anywhere when the original nonfiction book by Bajent and Lee, I think, were the authors, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, put out as nonfiction. It didn't go anywhere. Put it out as a compelling story. But I'm just curious, in your experience, what's the comparison, the impact of the written word versus a compelling film?
Well, my dad always used to say, a drop of ink makes the multitudes think, and it's, I think the written word in the book gives, it gives some authority, if movies come and go, books. To be honest, we started this project actually as a film project. So we wrote a script. We wrote a movie script. And the big challenge we had, Derek, was that there's so much material that we wanted to cover and include in the story that to fit it into, your average movie is about 100-page, 110, 120, some of the more epic ones would be a little bit longer screenplay. And to fit all of the information, so now Doug has got this wealth of research and we wanted to incorporate that. I love Bible prophecy, but there's so much background that I'm not familiar with, and I think that's the truth for most, even people that love Bible prophecies. We know what's in the scriptures, but we don't often know the historical context of it. And because Doug, he's done so much research on that, and we wanted to incorporate that into the film, and this was a real challenge. Because what do you bring in? And at the same time, you want to tell a dramatic story. Okay, so it has to fit with the rules of storytelling and filmmaking structure and so on and so on. So it's a huge challenge to bring in all those plot lines, to bring in all that information in the space of a movie. So then we actually, the first draft of our screenplay, I can't remember, but it was quite long. And we had to decide what are we going to cut out, and we just didn't want to cut anything out. To be honest, we wanted to add more. It was already tough. So then we started exploring the idea of a series, which I still like that idea. Yeah. Because you can explore so much more in a series than you can in a film. And then COVID hit. So when COVID hit, Doug and I, we saw all the studios shut down, and it was a huge challenge in my industry. And so we started looking like, what are we going to do now? And we started discussing the idea of turning the screenplay into a novel. And it was actually we were really excited about it because we could delve into the research, we could bring all those stuff in. It gave us a lot more scope. Now, later from that, we can extract. But we're building a world. We're able to build a world. And I know you've been writing fiction as well, so you understand that part. That's what a novel and what the written word gives you. That's really hard sometimes to accomplish in a screenplay.
Yeah, I've noticed that Sharon and I were talking about this with regards to a spin-off series of Doctor Who, which is one of the series that we've both followed since we were kids. I started watching with Doctor Number 3, John Pertwee back in the 70s. Not much of a fan of the really super woke most recent incarnation of the Doctor, but setting that aside, they had a spin-off more than 10 years ago called Torchwood, which is an anagram of Doctor Who, by the way. Torchwood was another team led by a character that was introduced in Doctor Who, Captain Jack Harkness, and they investigated supernatural things that were coming into and out of our dimension through a dimensional rift. And it always struck us as being somewhat hard to believe because you had this team of 5 people, but the kind of things they were doing would require just a massive support network. And then back in 2011, they got some funding and stars loaded in, and they got some big name American actors. Bill Pullman played a key role, and they had some other well-known American actors in it. And suddenly you had a bigger team. John Delancey, who played Q in the Star Trek series, had a guest role. And so suddenly you had this visual scope, but you realize it takes money because you're hiring all these extras who are just walking around in the background, not doing anything. Sort of like the non-player characters in video games to give the world some reality. But Doug, you can do that in a novel without having to pay all those extras. It's just as I think as you found, what was the biggest challenge for you after writing several nonfiction novels and using footnotes? I usually go for about 500 a piece in mine, and keeping the continuity going so that you're not suddenly dropping threads that you need to
Oh my goodness, yeah, continuity. I think that's probably one of the hardest things, because you start thinking maybe I should maybe switch these chapters around, but then you're like, wait a second, did I already say something, or did Morné and I already say something before, and now we have to go back through, right? And that is always a challenge, to do that. And I think just kind of the basic thing is show, not tell, because there's always that temptation I want to start telling you about things, right?
Yeah.
And you find little devices where you can, there's times that you can tell in a novel, but you want to always keep showing. You want to always do more showing than telling, right? And so, I would not consider myself at all a seasoned novel writer, and so to work that out has been challenging. And that's one thing that's been so great about working with Morné is that he really is just fantastic at that. And I think it's good to realize your weaknesses and your limitations, and so that's why I wanted to get somebody that knows how to tell story, and his understanding of the rules of the story. Now I've learned a lot more about the basic structure of what actually goes into a movie, and it's really quite interesting. When you start looking at a screenplay, and there's a formula, right? And why is there a formula? Because it works. People like it, and by page 5, something should be happening, and then you have these major turns, right? And people respond well when you set up a story like this. And most people are not even aware of what is really happening in the structure, the framework of really almost any story follows this general framework. And, so that's been quite exciting to learn all that. And then, just make sure that we're plugging that in and we're keeping it going, and, make sure that the character is active, not passive, right? That's something that can happen to writers as well. You've got this incredible story and plot line and all these things, but then your actor's just kind of floating through it all, right? He's not really doing anything. Everything's happening to him and he's not making anything happen. So, that's been tough. And we've had, Morné and I have gone through drafts, and we're like, our character Caleb is sort of just, life's happening to him, right? We gotta turn him around and make sure that he's the one that is doing stuff.
Yes, John.
Yeah. But we had a lot of fun. I mean, just creating the bad guys, that was fun. Obviously, we're talking about the beast and the false prophet, right? But then how do you develop these in such a way that is believable, right? That this could actually happen in the real world, but it's also true to Scripture. All of that was challenging, and kind of figuring out what's their backstory. What are they really trying to accomplish? And the Bible, I think, gives us a lot of bullet points. When I look at Revelation, I see it saying, okay, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. But then you start putting it into the real world. Like, this is not a robot. This is a man with his own ambitions, right? He had a mother, right? I mean, maybe he fell in love at some point in life. Who knows, right? But there are things that he's trying to accomplish. And so you have to try to bring out that humanity, even if as warped as it is, you have to try to bring that out and sort of get into their mindset as well. And then we created a new character. Her name is Isabel Markov, and she's the embodiment of the woman that rides the beast. Because it's hard to write about an abstract concept, right? I mean, I think the woman that rides the beast is more of an abstraction in Scripture, but it's hard to tell a story when you have an abstraction, and so Morné, I think this is your idea, as far as I remember, to come up with this character, and I thought it was brilliant. I'm like, that is so cool, so we can sort of put in her mouth some of the words that we see in Scripture. And both Morné and I had, as we were co-writing this thing, just this kind of fun thing of sort of her mental thought life of, she's the one that's riding the beast, right? And she's proud of this. And like, who's more powerful, the rider or the horse? Well, the horse is stronger, but the one riding it is the one that's in control, right? And so there's this sort of back and forth of where you just have this tension, and so a lot of that stuff was fun to kind of play with it, to bring it out, and I think people that are somewhat familiar with Scripture are just they might chuckle, they might smile, and we're like, yeah, okay, that's a clever way to put that in there, and so we had a lot of fun doing that.
Yeah, there, and I don't want to give out any spoilers, but there were a few names that jump out. It's like, okay, I know who that guy is, but. Morné, I think in the hands of less skilled writers, authors, you see, as Doug said, people who are telling rather than showing. They try to take a shortcut, or they don't know how to show the world around the characters, so they just give like a whole bunch of exposition every time they introduce a new character, and it gets very boring. But even more than that. My wife Sharon, who's got 8 novels in now on a series that begins with the Jack the Ripper killings, and speculates that perhaps Jack wasn't caught because he wasn't human, and then what was the purpose of the ritual killings that were taking place in Whitechapel in 1888. Writing the villains. So they're not just cartoon cutouts, like Snidely Whiplash, twisting his mustache and going, yeah, how difficult was it to get inside the minds of the villains in the Regenesis Code, so that they are acting as though they think they're the heroes of the story?
That's exactly it. I mean, I think that's true for even the villains of life, the Hitlers, the despots, they all think that they're right, so they don't think that they're wrong. So they totally feel justified in their own eyes and in their own, so I mean, basically our character represents the beast, the Antichrist kind of figure, but we like Doug said, we treated him as a real kind of character. He's an amalgamation of lots of different, even we took some inspiration from some people that but I won't mention their names, that are alive today. Very wealthy, he's got certain kind of means, and he achieves all these kind of things, so his thing that he sells to the world is that he's going to make the world a better place, right? So through why are people deceived? Why will people be deceived? Why will they take the mark? Because there'll be benefits to take, So, and he sells it and he believes it. He really does. I actually think it wasn't that difficult to look for motivations for the villains. You know, like Doug said, actually our biggest challenge was to create, more depth, or more initiative in our main character, our hero character, because our villain is so large, is larger than life.
Right.
And we realized that even when we were writing synopses and things for the story, it was easy to focus it around the villain. But, what makes the main character so key to the story? And that's what we had to work on. That was a bigger challenge. And, I'm glad we did that, because it's very, very important. He actually plays it. And this is not just going to be a single novel. The idea is also to be a series of novels. So this will develop further as we go along.
Yeah, I noticed book 1 in the subtitle. So
yeah. We want to do 4 books. That's our goal. And then we're hoping for, a whole bunch of probably series, Netflix kind of series or something like that, which I think would be fantastic. But yeah, and, so Regenesis Code, that's the title. And the whole point of this, obviously, is the mark of the beast, right? Like, what is going on? So we had a lot of fun. We came up with, I think, the molecular regenesis code. I don't know which one of us came up with that. Maybe it was both of us. Who knows? But the MRC, right? The mark, right? I think that was your idea, Morné. And I was like, that's really cool. Because, what is this mark, right? People have been asking this for generations, right? And, we're both convinced that it's going to be a molecular change in people. And obviously I've done a lot of research in corrupting the image 1, 2, and 3, where I think it's going to be this genetic hybridization between Satan and a man that gives, now you have this hybridized DNA, and then that man, the beast, will then in turn give his new DNA to the world, right? So, we sort of had to come up with this whole story as to how do we get to that point? Why in the world would we get there? Why would, this whole thing begin to happen, right? And so we have, UFOs coming, and we have the ancient gods that are coming in. But something that I think is really undersold, underpreached by most pastors and eschatology teachers is the role of the 2 witnesses. Mm. And I know there's different views on that, who exactly are they? But I think they're going to be 2 real individuals. Mm-hmm. They might represent lots of different groups. I'm totally fine with that. I'm chill with that. I don't really care who they represent, but I think they're 2 individuals. And in my opinion, it's Elijah and Moses. I think those are the 2 guys. I can give the reasons for that later, and I do in my books. But I think those are the 2 guys. And I think they're coming because anytime God brings judgment upon the world, he always sends a witness before that. He sent Jonah to Nineveh, right? Noah was a witness before the flood, etc. So these guys are coming to warn the world, hey, the king is coming, and you might want to watch out. So I think the world is going to receive them as hostile aliens that are just big party poopers, and they don't want to let the world have their fun and become gods. So in the course of trying to find a solution, our bad guy, Alexander Therion, he's trying to overcome this. He's got this big plan for the world. He's got this Babel initiative. He's going to make the world a better place. He's got all this technology thanks to the quote unquote good aliens, okay, which are the bad guys, right? But he wants to give all these things to the world. He's going to solve the problems in the world, and goodness, here come these 2 witnesses that are spoiling everything, right? And so now he has an issue, and so he and Caleb are sort of working together, and they're trying to overcome this and figure out what to do. And so then the ultimate solution becomes, hey, we got to fight fire with fire. And so at some point, it's a matter of, we need to evolve. So that, he's going to evolve first so that he can overcome the bad guys. And then in the following books, we're gonna see that the rest of humanity is invited to join in with that. And that's actually how I think it's going to actually come down. I mean, so if you've read Corrupting the Image 1, 2, and 3, you're like, oh, okay, this is this is kind of similar. So if you want the theology, you can go to those books. If you want the story, Regenesis Code is where you'll find that.
Yeah, and to viewers and listeners, if you're interested in just summaries of the theology in Corrupting the Image 2, anyway, we recently did a series of programs on unraveling Revelation with Doug, and you'll find that in our archives at our app or at the website, unravelingrevelation.tv. Morné, what was it, just going back for more background here, what was it about the, Rob Skiba's idea for Seed and then the work of guys like Doug that attracted you? I mean, why did you not see this stuff and just, like most people in the church say, oh, these guys are nuts?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've maybe always had a bit of a taste for the controversial, and I love research myself. So the information, even that you and Sharon and all you guys, Tom Horn, I've got your books and I've got things there on my shelf. Rob's books, Doug. So that is something that interested me. So I was, when I heard Rob's Babylon Rising and all that, I contacted him. I reached out and I contacted him and we became friends. And he said he wanted to make, you've got to add this idea for the series. And I said, well, I can help you. This is what I can bring. I'd love to work on it. And then Doug actually did something similar a couple of years ago. I can't remember what year it was. You actually put a call out, Doug, that you had an idea to make a film, and you actually, Doug had some storyboards and sketches, and which was very exciting. And we had a meeting with a number of people on a Facebook call or something. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we discussed it. And I said to Doug, here I am. I'm in. I'd love to be part of this. And it just went from there. So. Yeah, I mean that. Like I said, I've always loved prophecy. So since childhood, I grew up, learning about prophecy. But obviously, there was a lot of things that as time unfolds, like we all thought Jesus was coming back in the 80s. That was like a big kind of thing, and we thought we saw all the stuff. But now, obviously, so many years later, there's so much more that's unfolded, and also. Element, and there's a lot of things that came out in the research that all of you guys present. The days of Noah. What is that? What is similar to today than the days of Noah, which didn't make sense to us before in that context. You look at the technologies and things that are, the genetic, genetic manipulation. Since the discovery of, the mapping of the genome, and all of, the CERN, the Hadron Collider. There's technologies that are on the earth today that, we couldn't even foresee in the 80s and the 90s when we were growing up, So right then, the most technologically advanced thing was the barcode that was in your grocery products, and we thought, that's the mark of the beast.
Yeah.
As these things happened, I got excited about that, and it also answered a lot of questions for me in prophecy that were question marks, so some of the things made more sense, even the whole thing about why God would wipe out the earth in a flood then, how was the earth much more wicked then than it is now, but when you understand how important it was, and that's where the corrupting the image and all of these things come in, Satan wanted to corrupt the seed, and how, understanding that actually gave me it gave me an understanding of what God's heart was in something as cataclysmic as the flood. And that's true even for the judgments that are coming. So in the end, God's word will be fulfilled, and it's very exciting. So, and we want people to get excited about this. This is fictional. This isn't the Bible. We're writing a fiction story. We're trying our best to represent Scripture well in a fictional context. So we are taking dramatic liberties. Doug and I even don't agree 100% on everything. We'll debate some things, but we're in unity in spirit, I defer to Doug's research in the end, in terms of that. But what we ultimately want people to do is go back to their Bibles, and research this and seek it out, because it's important. It was written for this time. It was written for us living today.
Amen. Doug, one of the things I was really excited to see was that because even though after the fact I could recognize it's going back to Dan Brown, that his characters are really flat and they are kind of moved around on the chessboard just to fulfill the plot. They don't seem to act in a rational way. But I did enjoy the mystery, that was unfolding, the clues and the evidence and all this other stuff. What I like about, and I'm about a quarter of the way into the Regenesis Code right now. And as I told you on the phone the other day, I will read this, unlike the stack of books, sadly, piling up in the back of my office over here that I never seem to find time for. I will make time for this. So I'm really enjoying it. The characters ring true. They're acting in a rational way, like you would expect a normal person to behave when confronted certain stimuli. But I also appreciate that you brought in your research on the Mount Hermon inscription and that new evidence and made that part of the plot. Why did you choose to use that instead of just looking at that as, okay, well, that's an interesting historical marker showing that Greek speakers 2,000 years ago still knew the story of the Watchers on Mount Hermon? Why did you choose to use that to help drive your plot forward?
Yeah, well, again, I really do believe that I think the research that I've done in Crypt of the Image, I think it's correct, right? That's why I did it. But, so I think this is something that is going to give a lot of depth to this story, and I love a story where there's just stuff and you can keep going. You're like, wow, there's so much to this, right? And the first time you see it or you read it, you may not appreciate that. But, this is, I think, what's going to keep people sort of coming back. They're going to keep them talking about it. And they'll be like, oh my goodness, this isn't just fiction, right? There's a lot to that. I mean, that's one reason the Dan Brown books were very popular, is because there's a lot of historical research and people are like, oh my goodness, this isn't just something that he made up out of his head. Yeah. We may not agree with the conclusions, but, there was a lot of, hardcore research that was put into that. And, so that's why I wanted to do that, so that people who are watching, they're like, wait, there really is a stele, and they can go and look it up. And sure enough, there is a stele that you can find in the British Museum, and it really was found by Charles Warren, and a bunch of other stuff as well. He found a lot of stuff.
The Moabite stone, the Mesha stela. Warren's shaft.
Warren shaft, right? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that he was finding in the mid 1800s. And so it just kind of gives it that authenticity that, oh wow, this is real stuff, Now, obviously, like I go into Gilgal Rephaim, I make up some stuff there because I don't know that we can actually find those things, but that's kind of where you have a little bit of fiction and a whole lot of nonfiction that's going into that, right? So the places that we go to, many of the artifacts, not all, but many of the artifacts are real. It's just a matter of, do you find them in that place and in that time, and does it unfold that way, right? And I think when we start looking at the end times, we like this is something that Morné and I talked about. Like you have kind of this sense of there's magic, there are these ancient gods, but there's also this whole alien thing, right? And then you have the genetic, part, and we think that all of those will come together in the end. As far as the aliens, I think we're both in, or maybe probably all of us are in agreement that aliens are just, fallen angels, demons, whatever, masking around as aliens. But that's the ruse. That's what gives them this, it gives them some kind of authority in the world, is that people think that they really are advanced beings from some other place, But then you have somebody who's into the occult might say, oh yeah, we know the truth about those guys, right? And this is what you have like Barbara Marcianek and all these other writers that have talked about these encounters that they've had with, Ashtar Command, Galactic Command, whatever it is, So they're talking about aliens, but they're always kind of weird aliens, and they're for some strange reason, they're more like occult type beings than they are beings from some other galaxy. So, we're trying to bring all of those things together, and some of these ancient tablets and things are going to really just give credence to that. And so I even threw in some Sumerian, because Sumerian's probably the oldest language in the world. And this is where we go back, and you and I share a lot of research on Enlil and other things, right? And so Enlil is just coming out of Sumerian, right? Sumerian, again, the oldest language, and it probably means Lord Wind. There's some debate about that, but probably Lord Wind. And gosh, Paul talked about the prince of the power of the air. I'm like, maybe there's a correlation between there, so there's just a lot of things that when you start to unpack it, you begin to realize that the so-called ancient aliens that people have been talking about are nothing more than the ancient gods. And their goals haven't changed at all.
Morné, when you're talking with friends and family and looking at the news around us, we're seeing sort of a reboot of the official disclosure that was attempted back in 2017 with the Tic Tac video being leaked to the New York Times. Leaked, even though it had been available on YouTube for 10 years by that point. But suddenly now it was official. It was acceptable for corporate media to start putting it out there. And now you've got, respected commentators like Tucker Carlson here in the United States, who's saying this should be the biggest story in the news, extraterrestrial life exists and blah, blah, blah. And you're talking with friends and family saying, well, actually, how do they react?
I don't know about you. I find there's a cognitive dissonance often, Derek, that obviously with a lot of these kind of more controversial topics, even looking straight at the evidence, it doesn't register. It's just, it can't be. It doesn't fit into my cognitive frame of reference. So it is a challenge. It is a challenge to be sure. So I think that's where bringing a story in from a fictional point of view, people drop their defenses and their guards, and they can be more open to, in a sense, they entertain, but there is like what you said with the Dan Brown novels, it then caused people to go like, hey, is this true? Where if you just gave them the research on itself, it would be easy to dismiss it, there's often that thing that if I haven't heard it from my pastor, then it's not true. It's unfortunately human nature. But so what we're trying to do is we're through writing it in a fictional way, hoping to draw people to the real research.
And there's actually some research that shows that people are more likely to believe a concept if they hear it in a fictional setting than if they're reading it in a nonfiction setting. So sadly, it's kind of reversed. My pastor says it, but I don't know. I'll believe Dan Brown instead of my pastor. So Doug, as a pastor, what kind of reaction do you get, especially from your congregation? It's like, why are you spending your time writing novels and screenplays?
Well, I think they appreciate the power of story, and so the feedback I've gotten has been really good. They understand that we can reach people through this, and so that's certainly why I'm doing it. I just think about some of the big hits out there that have had these kind of cult followings. I think about like The Matrix, when that came out in 2000. I mean, that blew my mind when I saw that, and I still enjoy The Matrix because there's still those little Easter eggs that you discover. You're like, oh my goodness, I never saw that, right? Like, that's really cool that they said that one thing, or you see the little graffiti on the wall and it turns out it actually means something, right? I mean, there's so much detail in that movie, certainly the first one, that you're like, wow, that they really thought it through. And, so that's what Morné and I have tried to do, is to create a world where there's a lot of visuals, at this point on paper, but we want those to be in film eventually. So what we've done is we've created New Babel, right? And, kind of given this representation to what it could be, given a big nod to the ancient gods. And we even talk about the Ushumgalu. This is the 7-headed dragon that's going to be in the center of the Babel Tower. And, all these things so that again, when people are watching this or reading it, they're like, oh, that's interesting. Because again, I think when people kind of come to the book of Revelation or the Bible, they're thinking felt board, from Sunday school.
Yeah.
They're thinking, got little Jesus right over here. He's on the felt board, and then he does the whole thing with the fish. And it just seems so cartoonish. It seems childish. It's like in the nursery, and they're like, that Bible stuff. And I think that is something that's working against us, is that people often dismiss it because the visuals are lousy. I still think back to the felt boards, and, but when you can start putting some flesh on this and bringing it into the real world, I think we've all maybe seen some of the concepts that people have come up with for, the woman riding the beast. And you're like, well, that's never going to happen. There's not going to be some woman who's like riding some animal. Do we really expect to see that? So you have to try to translate this into the real world. And how could this actually happen? I don't think people are going to just have a barcode on their head, right? Just like they're going to scam me when I go into Walmart so that I can, get out faster. And so, translating this into what this might actually look like. And to be honest, this has been probably the most beneficial thing for my research, is trying to put it in a fiction sense. And Morné and I've spent countless hours, probably way too many, to be honest, but we had a lot of fun. Kind of, as he says, blue skying. I guess that's what they say in South Africa. But brainstorming of, like, what could this actually look like? What is this guy going to do? Thinking about the false prophet. Is he just the basic sidekick? Does he do anything? So really trying to understand what he could possibly be. And then, just the Bible says, okay, this is going to happen. You're like, well, what does that mean, right? If we put this on the screen, what is it going to look like? And it's been an incredible exercise. And, I don't know that we got it all right. Well, we won't know till the very end, of course. But I would dare say I think we did a pretty good job of, exploring what it could look like. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, the book opens with some real action, and being a guy, okay, not into chick lit, that kind of drew me in, especially when I saw that there were some real world descriptions of just things like the relations between the ethnicities of the characters. You've got Jews, Arabs, and references to Turks and Persians in there. And, having learned the hard way back in college when I inadvertently called an Iranian fellow student an Arab, he didn't actually hit me, but, he was pretty scary, so I never made that mistake again. And the same with, in a Turkish cafe, or rather in an Arabic cafe in Jerusalem, calling it Turkish coffee, which was another mistake. Things like that we Westerners don't often recognize, but little details like that make a believable, realistic world. But when you're writing these action scenes, as I mentioned earlier, you've got, the whole palette you can draw from, because it's just, it's electrons inside the computer's hard drive. When you're translating this to the screen, Morné, how difficult would it be to take the Regenesis Code to the big screen and make it as believable as the novel?
Well, if you give me enough money, we can do it. No problem. No, these days, to be honest, like right here, I'm putting together a trailer for the book now, and I've just been generating images representing different scenes using AI. And that technology is advancing so quickly, So, literally, we are at the point where whatever you imagine, you can create. If there's enough resources and, will and whatever, you can do it. The technologies are getting there that you can, Doug and I talk about it a lot as well. So, it's obviously there's a lot of work that needs to be done to translate that into screenplays. And of course, there's the whole decision on whether to do it as a film and a series or a TV series. I actually am very in favor of the TV series idea, because we can explore so much more. And so it definitely is. I think if you read it, you'll see, and I think, Derek, that's maybe what you were saying, even in the opening action scene, you can picture it in your mind. So you can almost picture the scenes happening on the screen,
Yeah. And just kind of a little spoiler there, we that opening scene is where Damascus gets destroyed, right? So a big nod to scripture, to prophecy buffs, right?
Yeah.
That the destruction of Damascus, right? A ruinous heap. And so that was Morné's genius right there that came up with that scene, and I love it as well. And because we're trying to think, okay, Damascus gets destroyed, right? And so we're trying to put all these things into a logical, real world, believable sequence, right? What is going to be the real impetus for the end times? Why are people going to make some pretty bad decisions about taking the mark of the beast? And we think that fear is the thing that really drives people. Fear more than pleasure drives people. Pleasure, yeah, it does, but fear way more. Okay. And so if you have the fear of utter destruction, right? And so it served as an incredible purpose. So, again, we're just like saying, okay, which one of these events comes first? The Bible doesn't exactly give us a real clear timeline, right? And that's why there's a lot of debate about these things. But we're trying to come up with a believable timeline that makes sense and that works in a story, but not just working in a story, but actually could work in the real world. And that was part of it. And so, what is Israel trying to do? They're just trying to live for the most part, right? They're always under this threat of annihilation from all of their different enemies. And so we're thinking, okay, how is Israel getting involved in this whole thing? And so what we came up with, again, a lot of this was Morné's good idea here, is that Israel's trying to prevent Damascus from getting nuked, but the bad guys are actually trying to nuke it, right?
Yeah.
And so we have a lot of good is bad, bad is good type things, and that's part of the fun of writing the story is keep your audience guessing, like what's going to happen next, right? And a lot of plot twists, and so we really tried to weave a lot of those different things in. We both studied the life of Hitler and a lot of the things that happened there, and so we kind of drew from some of those ideas, and just pulling all these in, and then at the end we get to this climactic scene where, well, I won't give it all away, but where
I want to read it, so don't spoil it.
Right.
But no, I think that's absolutely right. I think Israel would have a vested interest in making sure that Damascus doesn't get nuked, because you can see Damascus from Israel. When you go up Mount Bental on a clear day, you can see Damascus. It's only 40 miles away. That's like from where I sit to Springfield, Missouri. That's not that far. We Americans don't have a sense of the scale of Israel. It's really, really small. And when Israelis come over here, we found, we had some friends come to visit here in the Ozarks a while back. They'd driven up from Oklahoma City. And the grandson of our friend was stunned. He said, "We've been driving all day and we only went this far on the map. In Israel, we could go from Dan to Eilat in the same amount of time." It's like, yeah, well, welcome to the United States.
And that's something else that we really wanted to do differently in this is not make America the heroes. Because I watched this End Times. I can't remember the name of it, but it was done by TBN. This is years ago. It was a Revelation kind of movie, and the American president was basically saving the day, and he was overcoming the beast. And I'm like, I love my country, but I don't think that America is going to be front and center in the end times. I don't think America is going to save the world, and so we actually really gave America a very diminished role. We think that, and we think this probably will happen, is that eventually the American economy is going to tank for whatever reason, and the American influence is going to wane heavily, and that will create this power vacuum that will allow other players to come in.
Right.
So, and again, a lot of that is just like, okay, how do we get to that place in our story? How do we set it up, right, without having to write 10 novels to finally get to that place, right? And so you have to give enough backstory that it's believable without going into too much detail that you're just kind of bogged down in the weeds here. So we had to really just do a lot of iterations of how to finally how to finally bring that about. And I think we came up with some cool stuff. But America's not the hero. We think that really Israel, specifically our character, Caleb, is the hero, and who's Israeli. And, I do Krav Maga. And so we got to do Krav Maga. We got to give him some really cool abilities. Cool. And part of his arc is that at the beginning, he's this guy that really has the abilities, right? He's really good at what he does. He's a special forces guy. And, he's got some pretty kick butt kind of abilities when it comes to fighting. But as the story goes on, he's now facing enemies that are super soldiers and beyond, right? And so he discovers that his abilities to do things become really inconsequential because he's not fighting against flesh and blood anymore, right? And so that's part of his character arc, is that he can't quite save the world like he thought he's going to be able to. And, we have to do that in book 1, but then we have to do it over all of the books. He has to have this character arc. And so that's part of our long-term strategy.
Very cool. Where do people find a copy of Regenesis Code?
They can go to Amazon. It's coming out August 4th. Okay. It'll be coming out in Kindle. I am working on the audiobook. That's what I'm going to do in just a little bit, is get back to work on the audiobook. And then we'll have a print copy as well, August 4th. So
coming out just over a month.
Amazon.com is the place to go.
All right. Dr. Douglas Hamp, Morné Theunissen, book, The Regenesis Code, The Cosmic Conspiracy, Book 1. Looking forward to finishing this and then start pelting you with requests like Sharon keeps getting. When is Book 9 coming out? When is Book 2 coming out? But I'm sure that people who enjoy a good story, especially if you're looking for something that's based on sound theology and really cutting-edge research. I can't say enough about that Mount Hermon stone. I mean, that is fascinating. And of course, that Charles Warren went on to investigate Jack the Ripper because he was the superintendent of Scotland Yard when the Ripper murders took place. So you've got a literal connection between Mount Hermon and Jack the Ripper, which Sharon used as a plot device in her series. Officially that stone wasn't open until 1903, but in her series it was open in 1870 and something got out anyway. But it is a real thing, and bringing in Charles Warren and that stone and Gilgal Rephaim, brilliant. Gentlemen, thanks very much. We look forward to talking to you when the next one's ready and when the film is ready to premiere. Yeah. I'll put a link in the show notes to where you can get a copy of the book. Doug is on the web at douglashamp.com. You can follow him and his work there. And as this project unfolds, we will keep you posted because, again, so far I'm a quarter of the way through the book and really enjoying it. Lots of action, lots of mystery, characters that are compelling, and again, some biblical truth in it on which the whole structure rests. And that's what's really important. Well, speaking of storytelling, or the lack thereof, the Duchess of Markle and her husband losing their $20 million deal with Spotify. Bless their pointy little heads. Straight ahead on A View from the Bunker. We've recorded a lot of video over the last 8 years, and we're truly thankful that so many of you have been blessed by our teachings, presentations, our travel documentaries of our tours through Israel. But sending videos to other parts of the world can get expensive, so we've now made all of our video content available on demand. Stream our video in full HD with instant access at gilberthouse.org/video. And during the months of May and June, you can save 20% with promo code VIDEO20 at checkout. That's VIDEO20. Video on demand for as little as $3 for 7 days access and 20% off with promo code VIDEO20. But if you prefer DVDs, that promo code works for you too. Log on to gilberthouse.org/store, use VIDEO20 at checkout, and save 20% on all DVDs. 20% off all streaming video and DVDs with promo code VIDEO20 at gilberthouse.org. driving the internet to think every Sunday night from the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at VFTB.net. You can find us also at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/GilbertHouse. But if you do watch or listen through YouTube, please, I implore you, take a spare moment of your time and download our free app. You'll find a link in the top menu bar at VFTB.net, or better yet, go to our web hub, which is gilberthouse.org. Gilberthouse.org. Download the app, iOS, Android, Amazon, Kindle Fire phones and tablets. If you want the Roku or Apple TV versions, we've got links to those there as well. But if you get the mobile app for your mobile device, which would make sense, getting the mobile app for a mobile device, you can not only take advantage of the content, which all goes there, hosted by a Christian company, and so thus not likely to be canceled. And there's a Bible module there, multiple translations, and it's an audio Bible. So we have an audio Bible as part of our free app. There's also a new function in there, a calendar of our upcoming events, by the way. You'll find that on the bottom menu bar there. But new function that we've added called messaging. Now, we didn't add it. The developers of the app added it. We just decided to activate it so you can go in and discuss this program. You can discuss any of our weekly Bible study, PID Radio, Unraveling Revelation. There's also a section there devoted to prayer requests. And this bypasses the gatekeepers of big tech. This is all self-contained within the app, and so not going through, one of the social media sites where they might see an algorithm might be triggered by a keyword or something and decide to, suspend your account or something. So please take advantage. Our free app, gilberthouse.org/app. Well, news this week that Spotify has decided to part ways with the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Yeah, I said that on purpose. Really, it's pretty clear to anyone who's got any experience in interpersonal relations that Meghan is really the one who calls the shots in that relationship. Harry, for whatever his reasons or his internal needs, is really dependent on her. Anyway, Spotify, a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, had announced a big deal, and I've seen it reported as 20 million, sometimes 25 million, and 20 million pounds, which would make sense. I think it's 25 million that they were offered to produce podcast content for Spotify. Now, Spotify's laid out some big money to other podcasters, Joe Rogan most notably, but it turns out that after 3 years, they'd only produced 13 episodes of Meghan's podcast called Archetypes or Archetypes. And they weren't about archetypes at all. They were really about stereotypes. Like Meghan, 13 episodes about Meghan, interviewing other guests, and yet the conversation always turned back to Meghan. And despite the fact that she won some awards for this, for whatever reason, the podcast, after the first couple of episodes where people were tuning in out of curiosity, really stopped listening because, frankly, the episodes were dull. She was bringing in guests and always wound up bringing the conversation back to Meghan. All right, well, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But it didn't bring in the kind of revenue that Spotify had hoped. Again, 13 episodes over 3-year period. And comes word also this week that she didn't even actually sit down to do the interviews with her good friends, Serena Williams, Mariah Carey, and so forth, that a staff member sat down, conducted the interviews, and then Meghan's voice was edited in, repeating the questions that the staff member had asked. Ooh. One of the executives at Spotify, Bill Simmons, who's got his own very well-respected podcast. That's how he became an executive at Spotify. He produced a podcast that they paid him millions of dollars for, but it's very much listened to. He referred to them as blanking grifters, and then added in his own podcast put out about a week ago that one of these days he's going to have to get drunk and tell the story of the Zoom call he had with Prince Harry, trying to work with Harry to come up with an idea for his podcast, which never materialized. Harry didn't do a thing. So Spotify said, okay, we're cutting our losses. Because they didn't meet the minimum requirements to get all 25 million, they're only getting a portion of that. Netflix is also parted ways with the Markles because they're just not doing anything. They took the money and they're not really producing anything. And again, I'm thinking, $25 million for 13 episodes of a podcast. Sharon and I crank out 13 episodes in 3 weeks between all of our various outlets. Now, we don't get the kind of attention that the Duke and Duchess do, but the kind of attention they're getting right now is not the kind you want. And sadly, it appears that as those of us who have been watching this slow motion car wreck for some time have predicted, things are now going south for them as Hollywood has decided, they're not really A-list, are they? And they're getting snubbed for events that Megan would very much like to be a part of. But even in the twisted world of Hollywood, you actually have to do something to justify the money. So I take no joy in watching this relationship between the two of them because sadly, there are children involved and it is painful. It will be for them. And we pray that they mend their ways. But until then, we say to them and to those willing to shower millions of dollars on them for no apparent reason, bless your pointy little heads. Well, coming up, we've got the Go Therefore conference in Ohio, and we certainly hope we see you there. The lineup for this is going to be a wonderful gathering. Dr. Mike Spalding is putting it together with his wife, Kathy. They organized it. This is 4th or 5th conference. We attended last year and spoke for the first time, and we were honored to do so and looking forward to getting back there again. L.A. Marzulli, Dr. Michael Lake, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny, Pastor Casper McLeod, Coach Dave Daubenmeyer, David Hebner, Dr. Greg Reed, Tom Dunn, Vicki Joy Anderson from Through the Black Ministries, Kenny C., our good friend, David Paxton, Randy Conway, Nathan Branham. That's the lineup. And this is just a Friday-Saturday conference, July 28th and 29th in Brookville, Ohio, just outside Dayton. Find out more and sign up today. This will sell out, so don't wait. July 28th and 29th, 2023. It's coming up quick. GoThereforeConference.com. GoThereforeConference.com. And please, if you're interested in seeing Israel, consider traveling with Sharon and me because we go places other tours don't. Thanks to our good friend Aaron Lipkin of Lipkin Tours. 2024, we will be back in the Holy Land March 31st through April 9th with an optional 3-day and 3 full days this year. 3 full-day extension over to Jordan, and our special guest going with us is Timothy Alberino. So this will be like a rolling conference through the Holy Land as we take you to the important biblical sites and some megalithic sites that are a little off the beaten track, as in no paved road goes to this location. God bless Lipkin Tours. They will take us, and we hope you join us. To find out more, go to gilbertsinisrael.com, gilbertsinisrael.com. That takes you to the Lipkin Tours website where you get all the information, sample itinerary, breakdown of costs, and all that. And we hope we see you in the Holy Land in 2024. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen wherever you're consuming this podcast. Again, if you're watching at YouTube, subscribe, share, and then download our app, because you never know when the gatekeepers might decide to kick us out of their sandbox. And if you get a spare moment, leave a review at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever fine podcasts are sold. That's where you'll find us. And give us a like on our Facebook page, View from the Bunker. Our announcer, the inimitable D.C. Good. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released, that is, under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 international license. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.